Welcome to a story that shakes the very foundation of justice and challenges our perceptions of authority and discrimination. Imagine the streets of a bustling city where law and order are the cornerstones of daily life. But what happens when those meant to uphold the law are the ones breaking it? Our story begins on a sunny morning, with the city waking up to the usual hum of early risers and the promise of a new day. In the heart of this busy metropolis, a police station buzzes with the morning shift change. Officers come and go, some with the weight of the night's burdens still visible in their eyes. Among them is Sarah Johnson, a figure of resilience and authority. Little do her colleagues know, Sarah is not just another officer, she's the newly appointed chief of police, transferred in secrecy to address corruption within this very precinct. Her identity is a closely guarded secret, a strategic move by the city's top officials to clean house from the inside. On the other side of the story, we meet Officer Rick Dalton, a man whose career is tarnished by allegations of racism and misconduct. Unaware of Sarah's true role, he carries a mix of resentment and arrogance, traits that have marred his judgment in the past. The plot thickens as Sarah arrives for what is supposed to be a routine inspection. Her hair, a crown of beautiful natural curls, is a symbol of her heritage and pride. As she walks through the precinct, her presence is met with mixed reactions, her anonymity adding to the palpable tension. Disaster strikes when a misunderstanding leads to a confrontation. Officer Dalton, driven by his prejudices and a misplaced sense of authority, makes a decision that will alter the course of their lives. In a shocking act that he believes will assert his dominance, he forcibly shaves Sarah's head. The room falls silent, the buzzing of the clippers echoing off the walls like a sinister warning. The gravity of the situation begins to dawn on everyone as Sarah stands, her dignity stripped but her resolve unbroken. The camera zooms in on her eyes, reflecting a storm of emotions, from shock and humiliation to a burning resolve for justice. As the video fades to black, the audience is left wondering, what will happen when Officer Dalton realizes who he has just challenged? How will Sarah navigate this betrayal? And what does it mean for the corrupt underbelly of the precinct she's meant to reform? Stay tuned for the next part of our story, where secrets unravel and battles for justice challenge the very essence of power and prejudice. Remember to hit the subscribe button to not miss out on what happens next in this gripping tale of resilience and reform. As the screen remains dark, the sound of distant sirens fills the air, a haunting reminder of the city's never-ending call for help. When the light returns, we find Sarah standing alone in the locker room, her eyes fixed on her reflection in a small, grimy mirror. The loss of her hair, while deeply personal, symbolizes so much more than an assault on her identity. It's an attack on her very mission in this precinct. Cutting back to the morning of the incident, Sarah's arrival at the precinct was initially met with curiosity and whispers among the officers. Who was this new figure? Why was she here? Her reputation as a reformer was known in circles that mattered, but here she was an enigma wrapped in the uniform of those she sought to change. Meanwhile, Officer Dalton's history in the department paints a picture of a man once celebrated for his bravery, whose increasingly aggressive behavior has been overlooked by his superiors. Interviews with a few colleagues, careful not to show their faces, reveal whispers of several internal investigations stifled by either fear or favoritism. The scene shifts to a bustling coffee shop across from the precinct. Sarah is seen earlier that day, her demeanor calm and contemplative as she watches the officers go about their morning routines. Her internal monologue reveals her thoughts, a mix of hope and concern. Change is never easy, she muses, and it often comes at a cost. Back in the present, Sarah's solitude is interrupted by Detective James Carter, a seasoned officer known for his integrity and quiet support of Sarah's mission. He enters the locker room hesitantly, his expression one of sympathy and outrage. Their conversation is hushed but intense. James assures her of his support, hinting at a group within the precinct who share his sentiments. You're not alone in this, he promises. Not by a long shot. The narrative then takes us deeper into the lives of the precinct's other officers. We meet Officer Lisa Grant, a young and idealistic cop who views Sarah as a role model. Her backstory reveals a childhood marked by inequality and injustice, her career choice fueled by a desire to make a difference from within. Lisa's view of the incident is one of shock and disbelief, strengthening her resolve to stand by Sarah. On the flip side, we delve into the mind of Officer Dalton, who spends his evenings in a dimly lit bar, nursing a drink and his grievances. Conversations overheard in the bar suggest a man spiraling, caught between the pressures of his job and his deep-seated biases. His monologue reveals a twisted justification for his actions, viewing them as a necessary assertion of power in a world he believes is against him. The tension escalates with a series of clandestine meetings among the precinct's officers. Some express fear of reprisals should they align too openly with Sarah, while others, like James and Lisa, are more vocal about the need for reform. It's about what's right. Lisa argues passionately in a dimly lit parking garage, her voice a mix of fear and determination. As the story unfolds, more details emerge about the corruption within the precinct. A shady figure, known only as the broker, is mentioned in hushed tones. This character is linked to several unsavory dealings with some of the precinct's officers, including, it is hinted, Officer Dalton. Throughout this narrative, the city continues its restless pace outside the precinct walls. Shots of the cityscape at dusk, its lights flickering like the pulse of an uneasy giant, underscore the larger battle against systemic issues that Sarah's struggle represents. The segment ends with Sarah alone in her new, sparse office, her eyes on the city lights. She's drafting a plan, her resolve clear in her steady hands. The camera pulls back slowly, leaving her figure framed against the vast, sprawling city, a symbol of the lone fight against a towering challenge. As the screen fades to black once again, the audience is left to ponder. What moves will Sarah make next? How deep does the corruption run, and can it be rooted out without tearing apart the precinct? What does the future hold for Officer Dalton and his allies? Stay tuned for the continuation of this gripping saga where courage meets corruption, and the fight for justice faces the shadows of institutional decay. As the night deepens, the city's heartbeat grows more intense. Sarah, now alone in her office, pores over files and reports, the soft rustling of paper the only sound in the room. Outside her window, the city's skyline casts long shadows that seem to mirror the dark undercurrents flowing through her precinct. The narrative shifts to the next morning. The precinct is a hive of activity, but beneath the surface, tensions simmer. Sarah's bold stance has begun to polarize the officers. Whispers in the hallways are cautious. Glances in the break room, loaded with unspoken questions. Sarah's presence has become a catalyst for change, stirring unrest among those clinging to the old ways and sparking hope among the reformers. At this pivotal moment, we delve into the subplot involving Detective James and Officer Lisa, who have started to covertly gather evidence of misconduct within their ranks. Their investigation leads them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The warehouse, dimly lit and lined with forgotten police equipment, serves as a secret meeting place for the officers involved with the broker. Hidden in the shadows, James and Lisa capture crucial conversations on a concealed recorder, their breaths held tight as each word adds weight to their mission. Meanwhile, Officer Dalton, unaware of the investigation closing in on him, doubles down on his defiance. In a grimy, neon-lit bar, he meets with two like-minded officers. Over beers, they plot to undermine Sarah, convinced that preserving their way of life requires drastic measures. Dalton's expression is hard, his resolve clear as he pushes a folded piece of paper across the table, a list of officers he believes will side with them. The narrative expands further, introducing the community's perspective through a series of street interviews conducted by a local news crew. Residents of the city express mixed feelings, hope and skepticism intermingle on their faces. A young mother, holding her child close, speaks of her longing for a police force that reflects the community's values of justice and integrity. An elderly man, his voice firm, recalls days past when the badge commanded respect rather than fear. Back in the precinct, Sarah feels the isolation of her position. She walks the corridors, her steps echoing more loudly than before. Her interaction with a young rookie officer, hesitant but curious, offers a brief glimpse into her philosophy. Change is never just about making things better for the future, she explains softly, her gaze steady. Sometimes it's about righting the wrongs of the past. The day culminates in an emergency meeting called by Sarah. The room is packed, the air thick with anticipation. Sarah stands at the front, her posture commanding. She begins to outline the evidence of corruption, carefully, methodically, her words punctuated by the silent reactions of her audience. The camera pans over the faces in the room, some guilty, some defiant, others hopeful. As she speaks, an urgent message is passed to her. The note's contents are unseen, but her slight frown indicates troubling news. Without revealing what the message says, she abruptly ends the meeting, leaving questions hanging in the air. Outside, the sun sets, casting long shadows across the city. The episode ends on a cliffhanger, with Sarah looking out her office window, the burden of her next steps reflected in her eyes. The city, ever watchful, waits for her decision, and the screen fades to black, leaving viewers eager for the next twist in this complex tapestry of duty, power, and reform. The air is tense as Sarah stands at her office window, her gaze fixed on the streets below. The note in her hand, still unshared with the world, bears news that could alter the course of her mission. She knows the next steps she takes must be calculated with precision, for the stakes have never been higher. Meanwhile, the precinct is a powder keg of anxiety and speculation. Officers whisper in tight groups, their conversations a mix of rumor and conjecture. Detective James and Officer Lisa, now back from their clandestine operation, are acutely aware that their covert recordings have implications far beyond their initial scope. They meet in a secluded corner of the precinct's library, the weight of their discovery pressing down upon them. Their eyes meet, a silent agreement passing between them. They need to act soon. Across town in his dimly lit apartment, Officer Dalton is pacing. He's aware that the tension at the precinct is reaching a breaking point, and his allies are becoming restless. The walls seem to close in as he makes a series of frantic phone calls, rallying his supporters for a confrontation. The camera lingers on his face, his expression one of desperation and determination. Simultaneously, the community's role in the unfolding drama grows more prominent. Civic leaders, having caught wind of potential upheaval within the police force, organize a vigil for peace and reform. The event, held at a local park and lit by countless candles, draws a diverse crowd. Their unified voice for change echoes through the night, a powerful counterpoint to the discord within the precinct. As the vigil continues, the scene shifts back to Sarah, who finally steps away from her window to join a late-night meeting with the city's mayor and top officials. The atmosphere is charged, each participant aware of the explosive potential of the information Sarah holds. The discussion is intense, each word measured, as they strategize on handling the delicate balance of power and public trust. Cutting back to the precinct, the night shift begins under a cloud of unrest. Officer Lisa, her resolve strengthened by a community's show of support, prepares to leak the recordings to the media. With each step towards the media room, her determination grows. However, just as she is about to upload the files, she's interrupted by an unexpected visitor, Detective James. His hand on her arm is gentle but firm, his whispered words urgent. "Wait," he says, "there's been a change of plan." The episode reaches a fever pitch as simultaneous scenes unfold. Sarah in her high-stakes meeting, Lisa and James at a crossroads, and Dalton rallying his last stand. Each thread of the story is drawn taut, ready to snap. The climax builds as Sarah makes a decisive move, standing up abruptly in her meeting. "It's time," she declares, her voice steady. "We do this now, and we do it right." Her allies nod, their faces set with resolve. The screen splits between Sarah's determined march back to the precinct, the candlelit faces of hopeful citizens, and Dalton's shadowed figure heading towards an uncertain confrontation. The music swells, a crescendo of drums and strings that pulse with the heartbeat of the city. As dawn breaks, the episode ends with Sarah opening the doors of the precinct, the early morning light casting long shadows behind her. The doors close slowly, leaving the viewers on the edge of their seats, waiting for the resolution of this intense standoff. The screen fades to black, the tension palpable, the resolution just out of reach. As the precinct doors close behind Sarah, the dimly lit corridors seem to echo with the tension of the impending showdown. The officers inside sense a shift in the air, a change that speaks of imminent confrontation. The precinct, once a place of order, now feels like a chessboard with pieces poised in defiance or alliance. Sarah's return is met with a mixture of apprehension and relief. Her steps are deliberate, each one echoing off the linoleum with a resounding determination. As she makes her way to the central command room, she is intercepted by Detective James and Officer Lisa, who quickly brief her on a new development. In a surprising twist, it is revealed that Officer Dalton, driven by paranoia and fear of exposure, has taken drastic action. He has secured himself in the surveillance room with critical evidence that could either incriminate him or exonerate him, depending on its interpretation. His move is desperate, a gambit that raises the stakes to a critical level. As Sarah processes this information, her leadership is tested like never before. She must now negotiate with Dalton, who is effectively holding the precinct's integrity hostage. The tension mounts as Sarah approaches the surveillance room, her team trailing behind her in silent solidarity. Meanwhile, outside the precinct, the community's vigil has transformed into a peaceful march, reflecting the public's growing concern and support for reform. The march is a colorful tapestry of the city's diverse population, all united in their demand for transparency and justice. This peaceful demonstration is juxtaposed with the high-stakes drama unfolding within the precinct walls, enhancing the narrative tension. Back inside, Sarah stands outside the locked door of the surveillance room, her voice calm yet commanding as she addresses Dalton through the reinforced door. "Rick, you don't have to do this," she calls out. "There's a way out that doesn't end with more wrongs." Her words are a lifeline thrown in a stormy sea, the sincerity in her tone clear and potent. Dalton's response is a crackled voice over the intercom, weary yet defiant. "I've made my choice, Chief," he says, the title spoken with a mix of irony and resignation. "I guess it's time you made yours." The episode cuts between Sarah's tense standoff and scenes of the marchers, their chants for justice now reaching the steps of the precinct. The external clamor of the crowd begins to seep into the corridors of the building, a chorus that grows louder with each passing moment. Inside the command room, James and Lisa work feverishly to hack into the surveillance system, attempting to regain control and access the evidence Dalton is threatening to destroy. Their efforts are tense, fingers flying over keyboards, their faces lit by the blue glow of computer screens. As the episode nears its end, the second plot twist unfolds. A previously unseen character, an IT technician loyal to Sarah's cause, emerges from the shadows. He holds a hard drive, the backup of everything Dalton is threatening to erase. "I made a copy last night, just in case," he reveals, his voice a mixture of nervousness and triumph. This revelation changes the game. Sarah now holds an unseen upper hand as she continues to negotiate with Dalton, her strategy informed by this new advantage. The episode closes with Sarah's determined face, the backup hard drive in her hands, a symbol of hope and resilience. The screen fades to black, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats, wondering how this tangled web of loyalty, betrayal, and justice will finally unravel. As Sarah clutches the hard drive, a palpable sense of hope surges through her. However, this moment of triumph is suddenly undercut by a shocking revelation. The intercom crackles again, and Dalton's voice emerges, tinged with a cold certainty. "You think you've outplayed me, Chief? Think again." The camera zooms in on Sarah's face as she processes his words, the gravity of the situation deepening. The narrative takes another twist when Dalton reveals that he has a live feed broadcasting to an undisclosed location. His plan to publicly reveal the contents of the surveillance room, showing selective footage that could potentially mislead the public and turn the tide of opinion against the reform efforts. This move introduces a new level of urgency to the conflict, as the potential for misinformation could undermine everything Sarah has worked toward. Back in the command room, Detective James and Officer Lisa frantically work to locate the source of Dalton's broadcast. Their efforts are depicted in real time, with rapid cuts between their intense focus and Sarah's strategic handling of the situation. The tension is palpable, the stakes elevated as every second counts. Simultaneously, the peaceful march outside begins to stir with whispers of the broadcast. The crowd's unity shows signs of strain as different groups argue about the truth of what they're hearing. The demonstration, once a single voice for change, now mirrors the chaos brewing inside the precinct. Inside, Sarah decides to take a bold step. She moves to confront Dalton face to face, her resolve firm despite the unknown variables. As she approaches the surveillance room, her team backs her up, their expressions a mix of determination and concern. The corridor leading to Dalton becomes a metaphorical no man's land, each step forward heavy with consequence. As Sarah reaches the door, Dalton's voice stops her. "Open the door, and it all goes live," he threatens, indicating that any attempt to apprehend him will result in the immediate release of the manipulated footage. The tension peaks, Sarah's hand hovering over the door handle, her mind racing to weigh her options. Cutting back to the IT technician, a breakthrough occurs. He manages to isolate the IP address of Dalton's broadcast. With a few more clicks, he redirects the feed, gaining control over what gets broadcasted. This critical turn of events is relayed to Sarah via her earpiece, a moment of silent communication that shifts the dynamic once more. With new confidence, Sarah opens the door. The camera captures her silhouette against the stark light of the surveillance room, her figure a symbol of authority and hope. Dalton, caught off guard by her boldness, hesitates, his plan unraveling as he realizes his broadcast has been hijacked. The episode ends on a cliffhanger, with Sarah stepping into the room, the door closing behind her, and the fate of the broadcast hanging in the balance. The screen fades to black, leaving viewers in suspense, eager to see how this intricate battle of wits and wills will resolve. The stakes have never been higher, and the resolution promises to deliver a climax worthy of the build-up, full of tension, strategy, and the quest for justice. As the door to the surveillance room closes behind her, Sarah finds herself face to face with Dalton, whose defiant stance slowly crumbles under the weight of his failed plot. The room, filled with screens and blinking lights, casts a stark glow on both their faces, highlighting the tension that has built up to this climax. Sarah speaks first, her voice steady but not without empathy. "Rick, it doesn't have to end like this. You can still make the right choice. Help me clean up this mess for the good of the force and the community." Dalton, his back against the wall, wrestles with his choices, the internal conflict evident in his eyes. Outside, the redirected broadcast plays out. Instead of Dalton's manipulated footage, the IT technician has cleverly looped earlier statements from the community vigil, voices of hope and calls for unity and reform. This smart twist reinvigorates the crowd, turning their confusion and doubt back into a unified demand for transparency and justice. Back in the surveillance room, Dalton finally lowers his gaze, the fight draining out of him. "I'm tired, Sarah," he admits, a flicker of remorse crossing his features. "I thought I was protecting our way of life, but maybe I got lost along the way." His surrender is quiet, not dramatic, but it marks a pivotal moment of redemption. Sarah nods, understanding the complexity of change and the fear it can instigate. "Let's fix this together, Rick. Let's show them that change can be good, that it's necessary." Dalton agrees to cooperate, and together they step out of the room, ready to face the consequences and the future. The resolution of the main conflict paves the way for wrapping up the subplots. Detective James and Officer Lisa, who have been instrumental in uncovering the corruption, are now tasked with leading a new internal affairs division, dedicated to ensuring such breaches of trust never happen again. Their subplot closes on a note of budding romance, a soft counterpoint to the harsher themes of the main storyline. The community's reaction to the resolved broadcast is overwhelmingly positive. Civic leaders and residents alike come together, their faith in the police force cautiously restored by the transparency of the events that unfolded. This renewed trust is captured in a series of street interviews, where citizens express their relief and newfound optimism. In the final scenes, the precinct sees significant changes. New faces are introduced, symbolizing the fresh start Sarah has fought so hard for. A brief montage shows reforms being implemented, training programs, community outreach initiatives, and updated policies that emphasize accountability and respect. The story concludes with Sarah at a press conference, surrounded by her team, the community leaders, and the press. She speaks about the importance of integrity, courage, and community in law enforcement. "Change is never easy," she says, echoing her earlier thoughts. "But it's essential. We must be brave enough to face our flaws, to embrace reform, and to work together for a justice system that truly serves and protects all." As she steps down from the podium, the camera pulls back to show the crowd, a mixture of uniforms and civilians, clapping and united. The final shot is of the city skyline at dawn, a new day beginning. The screen fades to black, leaving the audience with a sense of closure and a reminder of the power of integrity and unity in the face of adversity. This ending not only resolves the narrative but also leaves viewers with key reflections on leadership, reform, and the ongoing journey towards a better, more just society.